You went to school, you took the classes, but no one told you the real reason why you follow rules, why you feel guilt, or why you crave validation from total strangers. Behind every normal behavior lies a system, invisible, powerful, and carefully constructed. Welcome to the side of sociology they don't teach you in school, the secrets that reveal who really benefits from the way society works, and who's being played. You wake up, check your phone, brush your teeth, maybe scroll through the news or social media. Later you go to work or school, follow your schedule, smile when expected, speak when appropriate, and nod to authority. All of this feels natural, your own decisions. But what if I told you it's not? One of the first secrets sociology hides in plain sight is this. Much of what you think is your choice is actually pre-programmed by invisible systems, structures built long before you were even born. Let's break that down. Society doesn't just exist. It's a construction, built by norms, institutions, and expectations. These invisible structures dictate how you dress, how you talk, what jobs you respect, what behaviors you find weird, and even who you're allowed to love or fear. And unless you actively question them, you'll move through life believing you're in control when in fact, you're following an invisible script. Take clothing, for example. Have you ever stopped to wonder why you feel uncomfortable wearing pajamas in public or showing up to a meeting barefoot? It's not illegal. You could do it. But social norms, enforced not by law but by shame, ridicule, and exclusion, make it nearly impossible for most people. These norms are so powerful that we self-police. We don't need someone telling us what to wear or how to behave. We do it ourselves. That's the brilliance and the trap of modern society. Control doesn't always look like force. It looks like culture, like common sense. Even our dreams and ambitions are shaped by the society around us. Want to be rich, famous, respected? All of those values are embedded in a system that tells us what success looks like. But who defines success? Who benefits from keeping that definition fixed? This brings us to the concept of hegemonic ideology, a term coined by sociologist Antonio Gramsci. It refers to the dominant ideas in a society that are accepted as natural or true, even though they serve the interests of a particular group. Think of it as cultural programming. If the system wants obedient workers, it glorifies productivity. If it wants consumers, it glorifies spending. If it wants stability, it glorifies conformity. Now here's the part they never taught you in school. Challenging these norms isn't just a rebellious act. It's a sociological necessity, because only by questioning what's normal can we begin to see what's hidden beneath. Sociology, in its most powerful form, doesn't just describe society. It exposes it. It asks, why do we value certain lives more than others? Why are some people criminalized while others are excused? Why do some communities have everything while others fight for scraps? These aren't random outcomes. They're the results of structures, economic, political, racial, gendered, that benefit some at the expense of many. And yet we're taught to see these things as individual failures, not systemic ones. If someone's poor, it's because they didn't work hard. If someone's discriminated against, maybe they're too sensitive. These are the myths we've inherited and believed. But here's your wake-up call. The moment you start asking who benefits from a social rule, a law, a tradition, is the moment you begin uncovering the truth. And that truth might not be comfortable, but it will change how you see everything. Have you ever felt like you didn't fit in? Maybe you dressed differently, loved differently, believed in something others didn't, or just couldn't understand why certain things made people uncomfortable. What if I told you that normal is one of the biggest lies society ever sold you? Here's the secret. Normal doesn't exist. It's invented, enforced, and constantly reshaped to serve power. The idea of normal creates a powerful line between those who belong and those who don't. It tells us what's acceptable and what should be punished or excluded. But who gets to define that line? Sociologists argue it's not you, and it never was. In every society, there are dominant groups, people with power, whether that's economic, political, racial, or cultural. These groups define what's appropriate, natural, or moral. Everyone else is expected to follow. And if you don't, you risk shame, isolation, even violence. Take sexuality. Just a few decades ago, being gay was labeled a mental illness in many countries, not because it was harmful, but because it didn't fit into the dominant narrative of what was normal. Those who challenged that idea were ridiculed, silenced, or worse. The same happened with women who wanted to work, people who refused to marry, or communities that practiced non-Western traditions. Normal was always a tool, not a truth. And when people believe in normal, they start to believe that difference is dangerous. That difference needs to be fixed, silenced, or erased. That's how stereotypes form. That's how racism survives. That's how transphobia, classism, and ableism are kept alive, by labeling anything outside the narrow box of normal as a threat. But what happens when someone starts to challenge that box? That's where resistance begins. Throughout history, the greatest social changes came from people who refused to be normal. Think of Rosa Parks, Frida Kahlo, James Baldwin, Audre Lorde. They didn't just speak up. They exposed how fake and fragile the idea of normal really is. And here's the twist. The definition of normal changes all the time. What was taboo yesterday becomes mainstream today. Tattoos, interracial marriage, remote work, even mental health discussions, all were once abnormal. Now they're every day. That shift didn't happen by accident. It happened because people pushed back, because sociologists, activists, artists, and communities forced the conversation. So the next time someone says, "That's not normal," ask yourself, who benefits from keeping things the way they are? Because behind every label of weird or wrong lies a power structure trying to protect itself. Sociology gives us the tools to see this, not just in history, but in our lives right now, in the classroom that silences diverse voices, in the workplace that rewards conformity over creativity, in the media that decides who is a hero and who is a threat. It's not enough to just notice these things. You have to name them. You have to challenge them. Because once you realize that normal is a performance, you gain the power to rewrite the script. And that might just be the most dangerous and liberating secret of all. You've heard it 1,000 times. If you work hard, you can be anything. It sounds empowering, inspiring, even logical. But here's the truth. No one wants to admit the myth of the self-made person is one of the most dangerous lies society has ever told. In sociology, we call this meritocracy, the belief that people succeed purely based on their talent, effort, and ambition. The problem, it erases privilege, it ignores oppression, and it protects systems that are deeply unequal. Let's start with a simple example. Imagine two kids. One grows up in a stable home with access to clean water, healthcare, internet, and parents who can afford tutoring and college prep. The other grows up in a neighborhood with underfunded schools, a parent working 3 jobs, and constant exposure to violence or discrimination. Now ask yourself, are they really competing on equal ground? Yet when the first child succeeds, society says hard work pays off. And when the second struggles, society whispers, they didn't try hard enough. This is structural inequality in action. We're taught to admire billionaires, CEOs, and influencers who say, "I started with nothing." But they rarely mention the networks they had, the safety nets they relied on, or the invisible labor of others that helped them rise. For everyone's success story, there are thousands who did everything right and still got crushed by the weight of systemic barriers. Racism, sexism, classism, ableism. Why is this myth so persistent? Because it's convenient. It allows those at the top to justify their power. If success is based on merit, then inequality is earned. And if people are poor, it's their fault, not the fault of a rigged system. This narrative also prevents solidarity. If you believe everyone is just running their own race, you're less likely to see how the race is designed to trip some and launch others ahead. You won't question the starting line, the terrain, or the rules. You'll just try harder to win. But sociology urges us to ask deeper questions. Why are certain jobs respected and others ridiculed even when they require equal or greater effort? Why do some people have to work twice as hard just to be seen as qualified? Why are children born into poverty so much more likely to stay poor, no matter how hard they work? Because the game is not fair. The myth of meritocracy turns systemic issues into personal failures. It hides structural violence behind motivational slogans. And worst of all, it isolates us, making us think our struggles are unique, rather than shared symptoms of a broken system. But here's the radical truth. Success is never individual. Every achievement happens in a social context. Family, education, access, stability, safety. These are social structures, not personal traits. And when we recognize that, we can start building a society that values justice over justification. It's time to retire the fantasy of the self-made hero. Instead, let's talk about collective responsibility. Let's talk about creating environments where more people, regardless of background, actually have the chance to thrive. Because if we keep pretending the playing field is level, we'll never fix what's broken. You think you're making your own decisions. You think you're forming your own opinions. But what if I told you that every scroll, click, headline, and image is part of a machine, one designed to shape what you see, feel, believe, and even fear? Welcome to the sociological anatomy of media power. Most people don't realize this. Media isn't neutral. It never was. Whether it's the news, Hollywood films, reality TV, or even memes, everything is filtered through a lens of values, interests, and agendas. And those interests, they rarely belong to the general public. Let's start with something called agenda-setting theory. In short, the media may not tell you what to think, but it absolutely tells you what to think about. By choosing what stories to highlight and which to ignore, media outlets control the national conversation. They decide who gets attention, who becomes the enemy, and what problems are urgent. Now pair that with framing, the way a story is presented. A protest can be framed as a violent mob or a fight for justice. A struggling community can be portrayed as lazy or oppressed. Same facts, totally different meanings, and that's not by accident. Media corporations are businesses. Many are owned by powerful conglomerates with political ties. Their survival depends on ratings, clicks, and advertisers, not truth. So what do they promote? Fear, conflict, scandal, because those things get engagement, and engagement gets money. But there's a darker layer. The media doesn't just inform you, it socializes you. It teaches you what's attractive, what's acceptable, what success looks like. It tells you which bodies are desirable, which cultures are exotic, which voices matter. Over time, these messages become internalized, and suddenly you're comparing yourself to fantasies, standards shaped by profit, not reality. Think about it. How many women hate their bodies because of magazines? How many young boys associate masculinity with violence or emotional suppression because of action films? How many people fear entire communities because of how they're portrayed in news stories? These aren't isolated effects, they're patterns. And sociology exposes them. It asks, who is represented in media? Who gets to speak? Who is constantly the villain, the criminal, the joke, the background? It also asks, what stories are never told? Because the absence of representation is just as powerful as misrepresentation. When you never see your culture, your language, your struggles reflected on screen, It sends a message. You don't matter. This is why media literacy is one of the most important skills you'll never learn in school. Being able to decode images, headlines, and narratives is not just academic, it's survival. It's your only shield against manipulation. Here's one more uncomfortable truth. Social media isn't the solution, it's part of the problem. Algorithms decide what content you see based on what will keep you online longer, not what's true, not what's helpful, just what's addictive. That's why echo chambers form. That's how misinformation spreads. That's why you feel more anxious, angry, or hopeless after a few hours online, because the system isn't designed to empower you. It's designed to use you. But you can fight back, not by unplugging entirely, but by questioning everything. Who made this? Who benefits from me believing it? What's missing from the story? Who's being silenced? The media wants you passive. Sociology wants you awake. And once you learn to see the strings, you'll never look at a screen the same way again. Power. It's not always a throne, a crown, or a bank account. Sometimes it's a whisper, a rule written in no book, a punishment that comes without a name. And in society, the most effective power is the one you don't even notice. Sociology calls this invisible power, and it's everywhere. We're trained to think of power as something official, police, politicians, judges, bosses. But the truth is, the most enduring forms of control don't come from the top down. They come from within. They work when people start to believe that the system is natural, that questioning it is dangerous or worse, pointless. Let's talk about institutional power. Schools, hospitals, courts, religions, they're all institutions. And while many of them are necessary or well-intentioned, they also play a huge role in reproducing inequality. Schools reward certain ways of thinking while punishing others. Healthcare systems often favor the privileged. Legal systems claim to be blind, but often serve those with resources, connections, and the right identity. And when these institutions fail, the blame rarely goes to the system. It falls on the individual. You failed the test. You must be lazy. Can't afford care. You didn't work hard enough. Got arrested. You probably deserved it. These are narratives of control. They protect the powerful by shifting focus away from the structure and onto the person. But the sharpest tool of all, cultural power. That's when entire societies internalize hierarchies, believing that some people are naturally smarter, cleaner, more moral, or more civilized than others. You see this in racism, classism, xenophobia, and even language. Accents are judged. Names are mocked. Certain hairstyles are deemed unprofessional. These aren't personal preferences. They're tools of dominance, passed off as taste. Michel Foucault, one of the most influential sociologists of the 20th century, argued that modern power doesn't just punish, it disciplines. It doesn't need violence when people are already self-monitoring. When surveillance becomes internal, prisons become invisible. Ask yourself, how often do you change your behavior to avoid judgment? How often do you censor your thoughts? Dress a certain way to avoid risk? Stay silent to stay safe. That's not just social pressure, that's power working as designed. But here's the secret they never taught you. Every time you name it, you weaken it. That's why sociology matters. It doesn't just study society. It arms you with the language to challenge it. It gives you tools to name inequality, expose injustice, and demand better. Not just for yourself, but for everyone who's ever been told to stay quiet, fall in line, or just be grateful. Power wants obedience. Sociology wants awareness. So next time you feel something's unfair, trust that feeling. Next time you see a pattern others ignore, question it. Next time someone says, "That's just the way things are," ask, who made it that way? And who profits if it stays? Because once you start asking those questions, you're not just a student of society anymore. You're a threat to the silence. Society isn't random, it's designed. And now that you've seen what's hidden beneath the surface, you can't unsee it. The question is, what will you do with that knowledge? If this opened your eyes, share it. Comment with the moment that hit you hardest. And don't forget to subscribe, because the secrets don't stop here.